This book, Pleasers, let me just turn it around. I mean, you know, the publishers are Ravel, and this one's in white. It's tough on television, sort of glares in the light, but in the bookstores catch your attention. But it says, Pleasers, why women don't have to make everyone happy to be happy. Okay, take off on that, because my wife has some of that tendency.
You're married to a woman as well. Yeah. And we've studied them. We've lived with them.
But I like it when she tries to please me.
I understand that.
Yeah.
You know, and women, I think by their nature, because they're so relational, as opposed to most of us as men who aren't relational by our nature, they want to make everybody happy. Everybody's got to be happy, happy, happy. Why can't we just all get along? You know, try to avoid conflict at every spot in life. It rains at the family reunion, and it's her fault because she picked the date. They bite off more than they can chew. And so, yeah, you want to be a pleaser, but there's all kinds of pleasers. There's pleasers who just please to a point where they end up being depressed. There's nothing in it for them.
Do you think those women or those individuals who are trying to please feel like that as hard as they're trying, they still aren't maybe succeeding?
Oh, yeah.
That's very disturbing to them.
Oh, yeah, they don't measure up. And I think one of the reasons why they become those kind of pleasing personalities is they have basically low self-esteem. They don't feel like they're worth anymore. How do you explain this woman who people says, oh, Marge, I don't know how you do it with Harold drinking the way he does. And here's this woman, she's married to this alcoholic. She puts up with all kinds of garbage through 30-some years of marriage, okay? She raises 3 kids. She takes them to church. The old man doesn't have a thing to do with her. You know, there's a payoff there. There's that martyr in there that, you know, I'm gonna do it anyway. And what I've tried to address is to teach women there's something healthy about being a pleaser. In the pleaser book, I talk about developing no power. You know, get good at saying no. A lot of pleasers have a hard time saying no. She gets called to be the chairperson of the bazaar at church for the 13th year in a row. And she's already decided, well, this year, I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. The call comes. Mary, we'd love you to help this year, be the chairman. I think you do such a great job. She's, well, you know, Bob's schedule's changed and he's working more now, and I prayed about this, and I really, you know, I just hate to say this, but I'm going to have to just pass. Now, she gives all these reasons why she can't do it. She's given the person on the other end of the phone time to think about, hey, have you met Elizabeth, who just moved here from North Carolina? She is a whiz with arts and crafts. I know I could get her to help you. And as soon as that offer comes, before long, guess who's the chairperson of the 14th consecutive church bazaar? And so I'm just trying to teach the women that there's a healthy place to say no. And quite frankly, I think men have beaten women over the head with submission like baby seals. And I think there's a lot of us as men who make women feel guilty and are good at creating that guilt. So a woman runs on guilt, and guilt's not healthy.
Quoting Bible scriptures, but having absolutely nothing to do with the real spirit that inspired the Bible.
Right.
It's like a spirit of a tyrant or a dictator, nothing like a loving Savior who loved the church and gave himself for it.
Well, the pleaser, who does she bring home to marry? Like a moth to a flame, she marries the man who's never wrong, always right. When he's wrong, it's someone else's fault. His superiors never know what they're talking about. He's got a rebellious spirit. If he's a drinker, a little drink turns him into something that nobody would want to be around. And so I call many of these women, you might like this one, the Martha Luthers. They're the great reformers because they bring home these men to marry with all these leopard spots all over them. They get out their little psychological Brillo pad. They probably purchased it from Dr. Phil, and start working on this imperfect person, you know, trying to change him. And they're not being a good wife by doing that, and they're not being a good marital partner in any way. And I'm just trying to get them to see that, yeah, you can be a pleasing person and be kind and thoughtful and all those things, without always having to do things. That's the difference. So
yeah, I think being a woman, I think a lot of women try their best to please, wanting to be accepted, and also out of fear that they'll be rejected if they're not trying to always do. You know, they want to be wanted, and needed, for one thing, so they do a lot of that, trying to please. But also, I think there can be the other side of it where a woman wants to please because she has confidence in what she can do.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah, and see, a positive pleaser, as I call her in the book, is confident, you know, without being cocky. I mean, she really is. My wife, I would consider Sandy a pleaser. But if one of our children was going to a birthday party when they were little, I mean, how many gifts she'd bring would be unreal. I mean, it's the kid's 9th birthday party, so wouldn't the kid get a gift? That's how I would think. Oh no, she's got a little something for the 7-year-old, and a little something for the 5-year-old, and a little something for the mother who pushed for 12 hours to bring this child into the world. And a little something for her handyman husband's garage. I mean, I don't get it, but that's Sandy. She loves to please, she loves to entertain, she loves to give. And I'm always telling her, honey, now wait a minute, you hold back here a little bit. You don't have to make, everybody's not happy. I told one of the people from your staff on the way over here from the airport, who's a new daddy, I said, listen to this statement about kids. An unhappy child is a healthy child. Now you think about that for a second. An unhappy child is a healthy child. Our goal isn't to always make little Buford or little Fletcher happy at every turn. There's time they're going to be miserable. Why? Because they need to be miserable. Because they ratted on you, or their brother or sister, or they talk back to you, whatever, they need discipline. They need to be unhappy for a while. And I try to teach that kind of stuff to my wife, and I haven't been real successive.
So you wrote a whole book?
Yeah, I wrote a whole book on it. I said, maybe somebody else will believe me since you won't. But she loves to please people. But she's a positive pleaser. She's not a super depressed pleaser who's living with someone who's beating the tar out of her. And that happens.
So nothing wrong with wanting to help people.
No.
That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about people who actually get in some sort of a bondage to trying to do it.
They have
and being held captive by the desire to or the feeling of a need to where they're really living more like a prisoner than a person that's really effective in what they're trying to do.
And it seems to me if you're a person of faith and you love God, there ought to be freedom in that. And you have the pleaser who says yes when she really means no. And somehow we've taught people, and I think good little girls in our society, as we brought them up, were taught, not to say no. Hey, if I'm raising a little girl today in society, I'm here to tell you there's a litany of things they better get real good at saying no to. So the whole idea of developing no power, I think, is good for all of us. You have to get good at saying no.
Do you think, Betty, the desire to please, of course, I'm like I said when I was kind of joking around at the beginning of the program, I'm glad that you like to please me. I appreciate that. But, I feel like that I try to please you. I feel like we live wanting to make one another happy, but I don't think we're in bondage to that. I don't think you have to get up every morning thinking I better line up a certain way. I think that would be miserable.
Yeah, it's not a matter I feel like I have to please you. It's a matter of I want to please you because you've made me feel confident in who I am too, along with first of all the Lord's relationship with Him, but He makes me feel confident and able and smart enough to make decisions and to do things to where I desire to give back.
Right, and that honesty, being in the limelight, you get letters like I get letters, and you get letters that are, they might as well be written in blood. They are nasty. They couldn't be any nastier.
Church folks can be pretty tacky.
Then they sign it in Christian law, Margaret.
After they just bludgeon you.
Pow! I'd love to take Margaret out on a Christian loving way, of course. I meant that. Only in a Christian loving way would I take her out. But my wife, she's the one. I read these letters. I'm so dumb. I read the letters. And I look at this letter this woman wrote to me, and my wife reads it, and she goes, and she sort of tosses it aside. She says, leave me. She said, it's easy to love those people who think you're wonderful. It's difficult to love those people who think you're a real jerk.
Boy, now, that's powerful.
It is, because you don't want your mate to be a yes woman, so to speak. You want her to be able to tell you the truth. You tell the truth in love. And that's why I'm trying to take the woman who is hung up on pleasing. And there are pleaser groups now around the country who are using this book as their study book. I mean,
So where do you take a woman or any person that's held captive by this feeling, I've got to live up to expectations? And by the way, it hurt me. You know, it hurt me, and when you were talking about this woman doing the 13 or 14 different church functions in a row, one of the religious communities, and it may be the same way out in the secular, outside the church world, and maybe their same modus operandi, but the religious community will try to convince you how you're the man of the hour, how, you know, it won't happen in our city unless you come, and how great the things will be when you do come. And I found myself being trapped trying to live up to the expectations that people had, live up to their needs, fulfilling their needs, and here I want to please, but of course I'm pleasing God by doing this, and I actually found myself bound and held captive by my schedule. And I have an idea, when you're talking to women here, a lot of women are held captive by this, what is expected of them, and be sure that I don't fail them, and I live up to their expectations, and they find themselves totally trapped.
When I get a chance to talk to a pastor's conference, and you know what pastors are like, they sit in a corner and compare numbers and so forth. But when I get a chance to talk to pastors, I always tell them this: give your wife complete freedom in the church. In other words, your wife doesn't have to do anything. That's how radical I am. You don't have to do a thing. She has to be.
She doesn't have to show up at every function.
That's right.
Totally appropriate.
That's right.
And everything.
She needs to be a wife and a mom, if that's her role in life.
She doesn't have to be at every function.
Those are her primary things.
Now, hear this, really and truly.
There's freedom there.
Lots of churches hear it, because you really help drag your leaders into a prison, into a pit that you dig for. I'm not trying to be unkind, but it happens.
Well, we're all together. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have dinner. We're at a smorgasbord or a potluck or something, and the pastor's there, and the hostess turns. The woman says, "Pastor, would you lead us in prayer? Lady, what's wrong with your husband? Does he have chicken lips or what?" How come the pastor has to be the one that prays? You know, and that's what we do. We sort of place these expectations on people. And I'm just saying, hey, if it's my house, thank you, and the pastor's here, I'll pray, thank you. Or my wife will pray, you know.
So the similarity between being a pleaser and what people expect are close.
And measuring up.
Yeah.
And of course, see, the woman pleaser has this ideal self here, and the real self is here. And that huge difference between her causes dissonance in her life. And she shoulds on herself all the time. She's a great shoulder. She always says, you should do this, you should do that. So even when she does well, even when she does well, she tells herself it's not good enough. These are the people who run down. These are the people who run down, and they get saved every Sunday morning.
Fix it. How do you fix it? I mean, you wrote a book about it. Okay, what's going to fix it?
Here it is. You're in a social situation, lady, and someone asks you something. You stop and you ask yourself, what does old Danielle usually say in this situation? Okay? Now you think it through. A synapse occurs here. I mean, something actually happens in the brain when you say, okay. I usually say, okay, let's do that. That sounds like a fun time. What's the new Danielle going to do different? And see, you can read all the little shrinky books there are. And if the shrinky book doesn't get you to that point in life where it says, this is how you change the behavior, it makes kindling on an October evening.
Right. So what's she going to do? You're saying, here she comes. She's under the pressure. Now,
you begin to act differently. Now, are you going to feel like acting differently? Very important. No. You're not going to feel like acting differently. Why? Because you've had 38 years. It's saying yes when you meant no. But you begin to behave differently. And with those little successes, believe it or not, over a short period of time, doesn't take a long period of time, you can begin to feel differently about it. You know, I tell the same woman who struggles with this, pray into a mirror. Pray into a mirror. Eyes open. Lord, help me to love me is the way I know you love me. Because, see, people don't value themselves. Are you created by the Almighty? If you are, and you can talk with Him, and you don't think you're anything, yeah, you got a problem.
Well, let me just say this, and by the way, the book is in the bookstores, and I highly recommend you get it. And you can just check out all the material that Dr. Leman has for studies in churches and seminars, and it's just wonderful. He wrote the birth order book, really, that really helps people understand how they relate based on birth order. And then, of course, you one of the books was it sheet music. Sheet music.
Betty hasn't gotten over that one.
Yeah, she wore
but it's a bestseller.
Sack over her head, you know, because she talked about sex pretty openly. But he really deals with issues that matter. And let me just say this, Doc. one of the things that I've commented on after being in bondage to my schedule or trying to live up to being everywhere everybody expected me to be, I feel like I'm anointed to say no. I can say no real
I've gotten good at it.
authoritatively mean it. And I think that's what you're saying. Women can't do. I believe God will help them do it. And I think what Dr. Kevin Leman is sharing will help you understand how to get started doing that. So I highly recommend you get it. And I want you to come back. You've got another book you wrote about single parenting. We're going to talk to you about that because I think that is so absolutely critically important.